So
I was going to do...
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, March 12, 2018 Board of Education meeting. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There is one thing that I forgot to put on the agenda. I'd ask for a motion to add it. Mr. Macenti would like to bring us up to date on the Guilford High School Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame status. Is there a motion to add that to the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The one item on the agenda is a legislative update from at least Representative Scanlon and perhaps Representative Candelora. Maybe Representative Scanlon walking in the back door right now. Why don't we actually ask Mr. Maceni to bring to do the high school the Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame presentation if he is available.
That's Sean. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before I talk to you about the Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame, I have to just talk about our fencing team. 3 years in a row. I saw an email that went out amongst all of you. Somebody forgot to say 3 years in a row, team state champions. So that's incredible. It's admirable. It's probably the best, arguably in the state. So I want to congratulate all our fencers and our coaching staff.
Great.
So about a year and a half ago, I came before the board just to talk a little bit about something that was developing, a conversation that was going on, and it was regarding a new Hall of Fame, our Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame. Jason Marchie, who's here, will you just stand so you can be recognized? He was wandering around our school, and he saw the Athletic Hall of Fame plaques. And he came to me and said, hey, let's look at this. And so it just kind of took off, and people like Carl Balstracy got involved, and it is now a reality. And we're going to have our first induction next week into the Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame. I want to read to you just the names of the people that are on the committee. They've done an incredible job. Jason, as I said, and Mr. Balstracy, Joel Helander, Carol Wright, Jim Powers, Ruth Spears, Jack Thompson, and Marie Berry. That's the committee. I don't think I'm permitted yet to say who the first inductee is, but Mo Pleasure will be the first inductee into our Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame.
That's a great choice.
And the official nominating criteria statement, a person who was educated in Guilford and has made a lasting contribution of national significance in his or her field of endeavor. We're going to try to do it every 2 years, and I think we have a deep pool to reach into. So I sent all of you the webpage for the Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame. It has nominating criteria as well. So take a look at it, and if our community thinks of someone who's made a lasting contribution to the national or international community, by all means, you can nominate someone. So I just want to thank Jason publicly. It was a great idea, and thank you for really pushing this through. Mr. Balstracy always is just in on everything for this high school. It's good for young people.
Well,
so
thank you, too, Mr. Macenti, just for your enthusiasm from the beginning for the whole thing.
Good job.
And Carl, who I went to, and he had been thinking about it for a long time.
Oh, and it will be located, the hub, all our kids congregate right through those windows, right where that blue wall is. That's going to be the Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame wall right there. Plaques will be similar to the ones that you see downstairs for the Athletic Hall of Fame. And so we'll have our first plaque up there soon. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Maceni.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Representative Scanlon is here. If you'd like to come on up, if you want to sit at the table or if you want to stand at the lectern, whatever you would like.
Sit with these cool students over here.
All right. You used to be one of them.
I used to be one of them.
Yes. Senator Kennedy sent his regrets. He was unable to, and I know we're in session now. You're in session, yep. And so it is a little hard to schedule. We did invite also Representative Candelora, and he was unable to attend as well. But we look forward, maybe, to hearing you tell us what's happening in Hartford. At least until you tell us, we're looking forward
sure.
to it. So we traditionally ask our representatives to come in the first Board of Ed meeting when the legislative session is happening to let us know if there are any initiatives or anything relating to the budget or anything else that you think we ought to know about. So we'd like to hear from you.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Chairman Bloss, and to the members of the board. It's always good to be here, and to Paul and Ann, thank you for having me. It is the beginning of what is known as the short session. We have a short session every year in the even-numbered years and a long session in the odd-numbered years that became really long last year because of the state budget situation. Everybody in this room knows that we didn't balance the budget until October of 2017. It was supposed to happen in June. The good news is that we did pass a bipartisan budget at the end of October last year, which I think was the first time that's happened in over 10 years. There were some things in there that both sides liked and some things in there that both sides didn't like. But what we ended up having was a pretty good situation for our community here in Guilford. I know there was many times that I'd be on the phone with Joe Mazza and then Bill and Paul when various proposals would come out showing us completely wiped out when it came to ECS. I think that happened 4 times in 4 different budget proposals last year. And every time that happened, Ted, Vinny, and I worked as a team to reverse that. And I'm very proud of that. We come from different parties, but we are 100% united in our efforts to maintain Guilford's fair share of funding when it comes to ECS. So that happened last year. We are now in the second year of the budget. The second year of the budget will begin on July 1st of this year. And we are looking right now like we're going to have about $150 million deficit on that budget, which to normal people is a lot of money. In the crazy world of Hartford and the state capitol, that is a very insignificant amount of money in a $20 billion annual budget, and doesn't necessarily require us to act on that. 1% of the budget triggers the governor to have to present us with a deficit mitigation plan. $150 million is pretty much right around where that is. So in theory, we will not have to, unless something goes dramatically wrong in April, which I'll talk about in a second, we will not have to pass a second budget. And therefore, the number that was in our second year of the biennium last year will be our number for ECS this year, which was not ideal, but certainly better than it could have been had we not been successful in reversing those massive cuts. I say April because April is the biggest dreaded day for the state, because that's when income tax comes in. We did get some very good news from the December, January quarterly filings, which was that for the first time in a long time, the projection for income tax receipts was $900 million over the projection. We have been under projecting for some time of what the revenue was going to come in. We were $900 million over. A lot of that was to do with people who were trying to prepay their taxes before the tax bill kicked in. But there was some growth. Economists looked at that and saw some very positive signs from that. So assuming that we get another good overproducing quarter when everyone pays their taxes in April, I think that we will be fine, and that 150 would go away. And then we're basically back to dealing with the next biennium, which will begin in earnest in January with a new governor and a new legislature. So that is the 30,000-foot view of what's going on, and I know there's always questions, so I'm happy to take those.
Questions, comments? Anything other than budget happening relating to education?
So, this being the short session, in theory, everything is supposed to be about the budget. There's supposed to be some connection to the budget and any piece of legislation that we do deal with. This year, I'm not on the education committee, and so I'm not necessarily privy to exactly what they are working on. I do know that they've been having hearings and debating various bills, but I'm not aware of too many that, deal specifically with us. Dr. Freeman may have more. He's very plugged into that. But if there are things that concern you that are happening, I know I don't have to tell any of you this, but you can always feel free to reach out to me and to Vinny and Ted, and we will always do our best to go to bat for Guilford. As you referenced earlier, I am a proud alum of this school, though not this physical school. I wish I was. But I'm very proud of the progress that we've made in this district, and I know I speak for the whole delegation when I say we will do anything in our power to make sure that we help you continue that progress.
Questions? Comments? Okay, well, I should say you've hinted at this, and I think all three of our representatives, Representative Candelora, Senator Kennedy, and yourself, I cannot say strongly enough how responsive all three of you have been. When we've had a rough year with Hartford, obviously not so rough as the year you've had in Hartford, I'm sure. This is, you know, it used to be that the representatives would come in and they'd say, you know, I feel sorry for you poor people on the Board of Education, all those meetings and everything. I don't think you really feel that way anymore. It's kind of reversed a little bit now, and this is a tough job. It's trying to balance really all the problems and issues that we're trying to address as a state. I think all three of our representatives are really doing a terrific job, and we're very, very grateful, and I hope you keep picking up the phone when we call. So,
Mr. Bloss, I would just add, when we have dealt with local concerns as well, Sean, as well as Vinny and Ted, have been right there to ask how they can help, how they can support. So whether it's supporting us legislatively in Hartford or supporting us personally as we've gone through some difficult local issues as well this year, I can't extend my appreciation enough to you specifically, but to all three of you for the help that you've offered along the way.
It's my pleasure. You know, we're in challenging times. I mean, what I just outlined about the state budget, it seems like we're getting some good news recently, but there are difficult times ahead. My predecessor, Pat Woodletts, just released, she was part of the Fiscal Stability Commission. Not that you all don't have ample time to do some light reading of a 70-page state report, but she was a member of this commission that looked at all of our state finances and how we can better grow Connecticut's economy, which is something that both parties, you know, look to as the answer, because they've tried tax increases in the last few years. They have not worked. They tried massive spending cuts, and they have not worked. We have serious systemic problems at the state capitol that have been in place for some time. There are no easy answers, but this commission, on a bipartisan basis, did put out some very interesting recommendations. And in our state budget that we passed in October of last year, we actually mandated that the legislature would have to have an up or down vote on their recommendations, so that this just didn't become another endless blue ribbon commission that's report ended up somewhere on a shelf. And so I don't love everything in that report. I'm sure if Vinny was here, he would say the same thing. But there are a lot of very important things in that report that I think we have to talk about. And the trickle-down effect of that would certainly have an impact on Guilford and on local education and on municipal aid. So in your spare time, I would encourage you to take a look at that. It's very interesting. They made some very provocative recommendations that are outside of what the norm you'd expect them to be. And I just strongly encourage everyone to take a look at that in the context of where we may be heading as a state, and therefore where we may be heading as a district.
great. Well, thank you again. And any other questions, comments? Okay. Then appreciate you coming in, and we will undoubtedly stay in touch.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sean.
I did also ask for 9.1 update on school safety. I did ask Chief Hutchison to join us here this evening, and I asked if you would please come up here. And we're taking him out of order because he undoubtedly has somewhere. Yes, exactly. Somewhere else to be, but we did talk at our last workshop meeting, the Board of Ed workshop meeting last month, about obvious concerns right now in the community and in the state and nationally about school safety and what is being done, what can be done, what are concerns being raised, how can we try to encourage and try to further school safety. And Dr. Freeman and I think talked to the board about this a couple of weeks ago, but we thought it would be a good idea to hear directly from you, Dr. Freeman, and also Chief Hutchison about how the collaborative relationship is working between the schools and the police department. But I am going to say right now, I don't expect you to give us detailed information in a public meeting about exactly what is being done to further school safety outside of broad areas. And broad areas, I think, are fine. But I had somebody stop me and wanted to get information about exactly what kind of locking mechanisms we had on our doors and what kind of what were the doors made of and what. And no, we're not going to talk about that. I'm sorry, we're just not going to talk about that at a public meeting.
Your expectation
expectations are well set.
Yes. I don't think you'd answer them if I asked, but that is not what we're here for tonight. We respect that the police department has, out of all of the duties that the police have, helping with the safety in the schools is certainly got to be, if not the top, it's pretty darn close to the top. So we'd like to just hear from both of you, Dr. Freeman and Chief Hutchinson, about what the relationship is like, how can it be furthered, and if we as the board can do anything to help.
Sure. I'll go ahead and start. First, if I could, I would just like to reiterate what I shared at our last board meeting, which was not televised, but on the heels of the incident at Sandy Hook in Newtown, this new high school was designed but not yet built. And at that time, we paused construction of this building and pulled together a community-wide summit that included the police department, the fire department, the architects who were involved in the school design here at the high school, school and community leaders, as well as an outside specialist to consult with us on security here for the new building that we were about to construct, but also just school-wide. And from that summit, we put together a list of recommendations, some of which did impact and change the design for this school. Those recommendations were taken into the design of this school, and those recommendations went on to change the front entrances and the perimeter controls in all 6 of our other schools. We were able to land a significant grant from the state of Connecticut, the Safety and Security Grant, and those monies were used over the next successive years to restructure the fronts at all of our schools. And there is, in fact, a video. It runs about 28 minutes, but there's a video on our website that highlights some of the facility work that was done and does highlight some of that security work that was done. But I feel most importantly, what has improved over the last several years is the collaborative relationship between the Guilford Police Department and the Guilford Public Schools. We've always had a positive relationship with the Guilford Police Department, but we learned that there's nothing more important than that relationship moving forward. And on Friday, the chief and I released a letter to the community highlighting that relationship and the way that we have worked together collaboratively moving forward. The chief and I talk regularly. Every time there's a significant snow event, every time there's a concern in the community, and as I said about Representative Scanlon, the schools couldn't ask for a better partner, whether it is support at the high school for a big event, whether it is information, whether it is help with an American Idol event, or talking about the most important issue that we have in our schools, the safety and well-being of our kids. The chief and the Guilford Police Department are always there and are always available for us and help us to think through those most important decisions. We have trained collaboratively. Just a few weeks ago, the leadership team of Guilford Public Schools, all of our principals and central office staff, went through collaborative training with representatives from the Guilford Police Department and the Guilford Fire Department. And we were training on intruder protocols. That is specifically what we were discussing. We had scheduled that planning last summer. That was not something that was done in response to the recent Florida incident. It was scheduled because the police department came to us and said that there's new information and we want to bring the newest, most cutting-edge protocols to the schools and talk about how we're going to continue to keep making our schools safer than they currently are. The police department are participants every time that we do a lockdown drill in any one of our 7 schools. Police are on site and participating in that. We have a full-time school resource officer assigned to the schools. That's not something we didn't have until a few years ago. That is something that Chief Hutchinson felt was really important and has turned out to be an incredible benefit to our schools. Both the position and the individual in the position have done exceptionally well. We are currently, and these are reactions to Parkland, but in the system we are currently reviewing pickup and drop-off protocols at a number of our schools, and a number of the community members are going to be hearing from their specific principal about how those procedures might be changed from a parent perspective. We're looking at new visitor identification procedures to use coming in. And again, we're talking about our relationship and specifically talking about the human element. The most important element in our security plan is that parents are talking to their students about what happens in school and what they experience on their social media, and that parents and students come to the administration, go to a teacher or go to a parent if they think that somebody is being bullied or being ostracized or behaving in an unsafe way. When we know those things, we can react and we can make sure that people get the help they need and make sure that we're keeping the schools safe. That's what the letter highlighted. I appreciate, Chief, you being here tonight, but that's how we're choosing to move forward. We're looking at the procedures, but we're also talking to the people in our schools about how to keep each other safe.
So just to expand on what Dr. Freeman was saying, I think to highlight a few of the points he made, the most important thing, one of the most important things for us is the fact that this is a proactive approach to school safety. We don't sit and wait for something bad to happen and then react. This has been something that we've been doing since I've been a cop here I'm on my 29th year, and it continues. It started under every chief I worked for, and I continue it now. You can't be reactive or you're always going to be behind the eight ball. So we're constantly working with the schools. We're constantly doing our own research on safety protocols and response protocols. In fact, the irony of, the day the shooting happened in Parkland, I was in one of the school buildings practicing intruder response with the fire department and other police officers. We had that planned, as he said, months ago, and that was an additional training beyond what the teacher response would be. We do our own response training as well. This is a constant improvement approach to things. The other point he made is having the officers in the schools, the school resource officer, and the officers who are in every school every single day, establishing that comfort level, those relationships with the kids, with the administrators, with the teachers, and not being that unapproachable blue-suited figure that people tend to be sometimes intimidated by, improves the ability for us to get information that might prevent something from happening later on. So having kids being comfortable with us. The school resource officer is constantly, we get a weekly report from her about all the things she's dealing with, all the things she's addressed. Every officer that goes into every school have great relationships with the students, with the teachers, and that level of trust that's being built up is what's going to pay off in the end, and we intend to continue to do that. We do it as much as possible. And those are the types of things that we continue. We can only promise to continue to educate ourselves and then educate the schools and ask for them to educate us on some of the things that they think would be helpful for us. And it's an approach we're going to continue and one that I think is the best approach at this point. So.
Questions? Comments? I wonder if you can just talk for a little bit about what you think parents should do in terms of communicating with their kids about the what I guess were identified in Parkland as red flag issues. How do you have that conversation?
Well, I think it's how do you have it? You have it very openly, and I'm not going to I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I have these conversations with them all the time. I'm not naive enough to think that they're going to give me all the information all the time, but the more you talk about it, again, the comfort level with cops in schools and cops with teachers and cops with administrators, it's the same thing with parents and kids. Some of these discussions aren't easy to have with your children. There's, in addition to the school violence one, there's all the others that are always fun to have. But you just have to do it. And the more comfortable we're making them with the situation and the subject matter, I think the more successful we're going to be in getting information out. And I know for a fact that it's been successful. I hear about it all the time at work about information that's come to us. It's not at the level of Parkland, and we can all point to a lot of failures in that process that resulted in that. All the systems were in place. It seems like a lot of, and I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that, just what everybody else reads is the same thing I'm seeing. I'm sure there'll be studies coming down, but don't dismiss the information you're getting from the kids. Don't think, oh, yeah, no big deal. Let me know when the big one happens. These little things that don't seem right, if they don't seem right, they're probably not right. And, every time someone gets in an argument at school, that's not the sort of thing I think is where they need to call the police every time. But parents know their kids the best, and they know when they're nervous, and they know when something's not right, and they're going to be the ones that can read them better than anybody else. And I'm not trying to be a psychologist here. I'm just trying to, take the approach that we would take. It's the simple phrase. If you see something, say something. If something doesn't look right, let's address it. And the best result would be, hey, you know what? We addressed that, and it really wasn't what we thought it was, and it didn't rise to the level of what we were afraid it might. But we addressed it, and then it makes it easier the next time around.
Is there an appropriate protocol if a parent is concerned about information he or she is receiving from a child? Should they be contacting the police department? Should they be contacting the superintendent?
It all depends on the information they have. I can tell you this. We're open 24/7, 365. So there's always somebody that's willing to have a conversation. We're not that department that says, call us Monday morning, that guy's not here. If somebody wants to call at any point at any time, if someone wants to call our anonymous tip line, if someone wants to email something, all the information is on our website. We're always happy to have that discussion. We would never want anybody, and we hear it way too often, hey, we just didn't want to bother you. Well, that's why we're down there.
Right.
Really, it's really not a bother. I mean, and I'm not just saying that, it's just, it's amazing to me that people still are being considerate to, maybe not calling us after 5 o'clock or so. We're there 24/7, 365, doing the same thing all day long. If anybody has a question, concern, information that they want to share with us, as I said, email, telephones, in person, walk through the door. If you're not comfortable going to, a certain officer, go to a different one, ask for a boss. There's multiple levels that these things can be addressed.
And this is one of the things where I think the relationship is important. There's no wrong person to go to. If a parent or a student were to go to a teacher or an administrator in a school and we thought it was more appropriate a police issue, we're not territorial about that. And in fact, we're going to help that student or parent to report it to the police. We're not going to say not our job. We're not going to hold that information and keep it. We will help whoever reports get that information to the right place. And I know that if somebody went to the police with something that was a school concern, the same thing would happen. That person would get help in bringing it to the appropriate folks in the school. What's important, especially for a student, is that they tell some trusted adult. Tell a parent, tell a teacher, tell a principal, tell the police. But they have to tell somebody so that it does get to the right location and people get help or appropriate steps can be taken.
And how are they being encouraged to do that? Is there specific guidelines provided?
So we talk about it in the schools in different ways. It's talked about in health classes. It gets talked about in advisories. It gets talked about in morning meetings or whole school meetings. It depends on the school and the age level. And after reminders like the recent events that have happened, it goes home in letters from me or from the chief and me together, reminding people that that's the most important step. It's why we've invited the chief to be with us tonight, to get that reminder out.
I wonder if, just because we've all heard that students, the Student Senate and student councils at both Adams and the high school, and obviously districts across the country, are planning a walkout on March 14th. I wonder if maybe Chief Hutchinson and Dr. Freeman could just give a brief update. I know Mr. Macenti had sent home a letter to parents as well as Mrs. Walker about what steps are being taken to keep those students safe. And
I can start from a school perspective. So the first piece is that we know that this is bigger than us. And so we know that many students in Guilford feel a desire to participate in this event. And we were not going to place the schools in a position of getting into a power struggle with rules and regulations and students who have a strong desire to have a voice. And so we have followed the guidance of the Connecticut Association of Schools and the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents and the American Association of School Administrators in looking at ways to make sure that we keep our students safe and supervised, although we are neither encouraging nor facilitating the walkout. So our teachers aren't participating with students, but we know here at the high school that a number of the students in the school population intend to participate. So we will have teachers who are both remaining in classrooms for students who don't want to participate and want to remain in their classroom, and we will have students, staff members rather, who will be monitoring the outside of the building. Mr. Macenti has met with the student council, student leadership in the building, and student population has organized. They have made it clear that they expect students who participate to gather in their designated locations, and we've asked the police to be on hand to make sure that we can supervise and keep the students safe and keep it and minimize the disruption. At Adams, the school has created an opportunity for a walk-in. The gymnasium has been made available, and students who wish to walk out of class to make their voices heard are being asked to report to the gymnasium, not outside of the school. And again, while we're not facilitating or encouraging, we will be supervising that space. The space has been made available for students at Adams who don't intend to participate and don't want to be part of that. And at Baldwin and in the other schools, we have had some small number of requests, and individual parents who would like to have an elementary student participate have been encouraged to come to the school, sign the child out into your keeping. You will supervise the child for that time and then return the child to school. We're not planning on having students from K through 5 participate in a walkout. So again, we're not encouraging, but we want to keep it orderly, we want to keep it organized, and we want to make sure that we keep the students safe. And again, we collaborated with the chief and his department, and they're going to be on hand to make sure that we do that.
And our approach, again, is one of safety versus subject matter. The schools have taken their approach, and we'll respond appropriately with the amount of personnel that we think we need for the number of people that might be outdoors for that period of time, and they'll do what they do and exercise.
And I want to commend our students, the student leaders who have worked with the principals at both Adams and in the high school have taken an incredibly responsive approach to this. They're not looking to cause a disruption. They're not looking to be disrespectful. They are looking to have their voices heard in an appropriate way and said to our administrators, how can we do this? Essentially said to our administration, we really want for this to happen. How can we do this in the best way possible? And I absolutely commend them for the way that they are approaching this.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments? All right, well, Chief, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming out here on a weeknight, and we appreciate your collaborative efforts as we try to do what we can to address this most challenging issue. So, thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, here, guys.
Okay, so back to the agenda. There are two sets of minutes, February 12th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved?
Second.
Are there changes, corrections, additions, clarifications? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and February 26th, 2018 workshop meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Changes, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public forum for topics on the board agenda. I know there are a lot of people here to talk about grade configuration. It is not on the agenda tonight. It is not a subject of anything that was going to be considered tonight. There's not going to be any votes on it tonight. I think the minutes that we just approved said, I think I was quoted or at least paraphrased as saying, it is a topic for discussion only at this stage. Further exploration and community input will be very important moving forward. I have a high degree of confidence that there will be meetings, hearings on all of anything. And I think, as Dr. Freeman referred to, considering ideas, and that is an idea. So it is not on the agenda tonight. Having said that, we will obviously, under item 12 on the agenda, listen to any comments people want to have at all. But I would encourage you to follow the news, and as we move forward, when this is an idea that the board is actually getting input on and considering, you'll know about it. I promise. That is not going to just happen in the dark of night. This isn't the Baltimore Colts moving to Indianapolis. It's going to be part of a very public process, and there will be plenty of time to have input on this as well as any other ideas that Dr. Freeman is even considering, not only, even before recommending. So anyway, I'm happy that people are here, but it's not on the agenda. But and there won't be any votes on it tonight, one way or the other. Having said that, as to anything that is on the agenda, are there any questions or comments that people have for items on the board agenda? Okay. Ms. Cohen, I think, is the reviewer for the month.
Yes. Okay, expenditures for the month of February were $4,288,792.72. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of February were 57.29% of the budget, as compared to 58.15% in the prior year. We did accept some revenue from an excess cost grant in February in the amount of $1,274,000, which is about 74.5% of the eligible grant amount, and we typically receive another payment in May, so we'll anticipate that, and in fact anticipate that to be lower than we had budgeted because of everything going on in Hartford right now. The warrant we're submitting is total payments listed in the amount of $1,584,430.93, and put forward a motion to approve the expenditures for the month.
Second.
Any questions, comments? I know this was talked about in the Operations Committee meeting beforehand. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Item 7 is communications. I really didn't have very many. I got an email about configuration, grade configuration. Anybody get anything else to bring up?
I did, and I want to take the time to read it thoroughly. I do think most of us, if not all of us, got an email regarding kind of responding to Dr. Freeman's call for, or looking at kind of mental health in the schools, whether it's start times, whether it's other things, and it was addressing a number of items, including concern about cell phone use and concern about substance use and things that we as a district may want to continue to pay attention to. So I did get that email communication, and it was an incredibly well-detailed letter, so I haven't had time to be as thorough as I'd like.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Wallace, I'll note I've had a couple questions about graduation date, considering the storm pending tonight. At this time, should there be a closing tomorrow, it would move the last student day of school and therefore graduation to Friday, June 22nd. Thank you. The question that I received was, do we intend at this time to begin taking days out of April vacation? I would note that the calendar we published said that we will take snow days out of June all the way till June 29th before we begin taking days away from April vacation. And so I do just want to note for the community that at this time, even with still one more storm on the cusp, I do not plan at this point to begin reducing April vacation and wouldn't intend to do so unless we begin using up the remainder of the days in June. I know that people have made plans for April vacation. I would prefer to stick to the plan that we published last November.
Didn't you say at an Operations Committee meeting when we were looking at the snow bids?
I did. I promised you that we were done.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I learned again that I should never make a promise.
Not like that. All right, so, okay, thank you. Any other communications? All right, student reps.
Okay. So at Melissa Jones, the students and staff are really happy to be back in school. And last week they actually celebrated Read Across America, which is an annual reading motivation and awareness program that calls for every community to celebrate reading on March 2nd, which is Dr. Seuss's birthday. And guests introduced themselves and shared how they use reading in their jobs. So guests included Dr. Freeman, First Selectman Matt Hoey, and Chief of Police Jeff Hutchinson, and just to name a few of the guests. At Guilford Lakes, the PTO sponsored a Native American culture arts experience, and the students were very excited at the end, and they wanted to participate in a group dance. And there was also a science fair, which was a huge success, and the students became scientists and investigated many different topics, and their presentations and findings were very impressive.
At A.W. Cox, the students also participated in Read Across America Day, and they wore red, white, and black to show their support. Second graders have been focusing on the attribute of leadership and have been reading nonfiction texts about important leaders. Also, fourth graders have spent the past months learning about the water cycle and creating the Speak Your Mind project, which is focused on opinion writing and technology. At Calvin Leet, they kicked off the Readathon for Sarah last Monday, and State Representative Sean Scanlon joined the students and spoke about the importance of reading and supporting organizations like Sarah in our community. First grade students have finished their Discovering Scientists unit, and the next first grade literacy unit will be Scenes to Series, where students will read and write fiction series stories. Also, students in third grade are now learning about myths through Greek mythology and examining the reasons why myths are told.
At Baldwin Middle School on March 15th, they will be hosting the Fill the Bleachers event, in which the unified sports for Guilford Middle Schools will be facing off against North Branford Intermediate School at Baldwin in a basketball game for unified sports. Spring teacher conferences will be hosted at Baldwin on March 22nd and 23rd, as well as Adams on March 22nd and 23rd. And they would like to report that they had a successful showing of Screenagers with nearly 200 people in attendance on February 22nd, hosted by the Baldwin PTO. At Adams Middle School, the 8th graders are looking forward to the 8th grade dinner dance, as well as starting to look at some of the high school courses that they will be able to take next year. And with that, course registration through Power School can be found online for the high school. And there's a chorus concert tomorrow, pending the weather, with a snow date on March 15th.
Okay, and at Guilford High School, so Interact Club is starting an event called Principal for a Day, where a student will exchange with Mr. Macenti and become a principal, and Mr. Macenti will be the student for the day. And this is, so there are currently 8 students competing, two students from each grade, and there will be jars in the lunchroom in the commons. So, and each jar will have a picture of the student that's competing, and the jar with the most money in about 2 weeks, so at the end of March, will be principal for a day and will take Mr. Macenti's position. Also, intramural volleyball has started, should have started, and will be commencing until April 13th. School of Rock is going to open in about a month. It's the last weekend of April. And also there's a Mo Pleasure concert coming up on March 24th that the community is encouraged to participate in.
Also at the high school, the Connecticut SAT will be taken by juniors on March 21st. Many students have taken SAT classes or used tutors, and teachers have also helped prepare students by giving out SAT practice questions. Also, IB students have selected topics for their extended essay and have begun to meet with their assigned supervisors. In addition, in IB, the class Theory of Knowledge has started in the second semester, and students have examined and explored different areas of knowledge and the ways that they have acquired this knowledge.
And finally, at the high school, the Guilford High School hockey team won SCC championships, and tonight they will play in states, and if they win, they will continue on, hopefully, to the finals. The fencing team has won states in both girls and boys, with multiple teams placing first, second, and third. And the basketball team, unfortunately, was defeated in the quarterfinals, but they had a great run, and we look forward to their run the next year.
Great, terrific. Congratulations to the fencing team, obviously. That's a tremendous result. A little bit of a dynasty there going on. It's not quite the Yukon women, but it's in the ballpark. Questions? Okay, I guess.
And we're specifically calling out the fencing team because Brendan is on
Yes.
the fencing team. Congratulations to all the teams,
Yes.
but in particular fencing with Brendan here.
Right. Okay. Questions, comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure you've got other things to do. All right, Dr. Freeman, your report, we've already had the update on school safety. Is there anything else you want to say on that?
No. Again, I just wanted to thank the chief for being here, highlight the letter that went out to the community on Friday, and had intended to speak about March 14th, but I appreciate the question. I think that we've addressed that as well.
Okay. 9.2 is a budget update?
Yeah, the budget update, simply to, as the board is aware, I wanted to remind the community, the Board of Finance met twice last week, on Tuesday and then Thursday, to review the budgets from both the school board and from the town, and to entertain questions and comments from the community. Mr. Bloss and I were in attendance on Tuesday evening. Mr. Kazin and I were there last Thursday evening, and the Board of Finance is meeting at this moment, and we believe they will be taking final action approving a town and a school budget. Mr. Sands and Mr. Bowden and Mrs. Trudeau are in attendance now to answer any further questions that they may have. I think that it is important to note that we do anticipate that there may be some adjustment down from the Board of Finance to the budget that this board approved. This board approved a 1.87% increase. We expect that that'll be reduced downward to some degree. We will need to schedule a time to meet. I will certainly have recommendations, but you as a board will need to identify the areas where we will absorb any reduction that we recognize tonight from the Board of Finance. As soon as I have that information, I'll share it with all of you electronically, and then we'll begin working on a date.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do a special meeting. I don't see a way around it. It's on the agenda tonight, 10.3, but we don't know what the number is.
Right.
And also, we don't have recommendations, really, and I'm not sure we'd want to even make the decision on the fly like that anyway. So
that was placed when we thought they would finish their deliberations Thursday evening, and I think it is worth noting the Board of Finance specifically didn't close deliberations on Thursday evening because of the difficulties related to weather and power, and they wanted everybody in the community to have another opportunity to attend a meeting and voice their opinion. So I understand their decision, but we simply don't have the information to act tonight.
Right. Okay.
And that concludes my report for the evening.
So 10.1 under the board agenda is to act on various personnel items. There's a resignation, Teresa Smith resigning for the purpose of retirement, reading teacher at Baldwin. Is there a motion to ratify that retirement?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then there are two resignations, Jennifer Kennedy, literacy coach at Lakes, and Nuria Miller, elementary Spanish teacher at Leet. Is there a motion to ratify those resignations?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 10.2 is an act on a non-renewal of non-tenured teachers. There is an exhibit, 10.2. I just ask that there be a motion to non-renew the non-tenured teachers listed on exhibit 10.2.
So moved.
I would just note, if I may, that these are both here. These were one-year hires, and this is simply a process we need to go through. I do want to note that neither of these teachers are being non-renewed for performance. It is simply a recognition that they were only hired to fill a one-year vacancy.
Okay. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 10.3, we're just going to table because we don't know what the budget reductions are. 10.4 is just a receive item, the annual report for 2016-17. I don't know if people have had a chance to go through this or if there are any questions or comments or thoughts or changes or anything. I'll do whatever people want to do relating to this. Any comments? We can carry it over also in
Yep,
case.
we can certainly carry it over. I would just note that I would like to thank Mrs. Laurie Hahn, who pulled this together for us. This is an annual item that comes before you before moving on to become part of the annual town report. It is a receive-only item for all of you, but it takes quite a bit of work, and we do appreciate all the time that Laurie put into this.
Okay, there is, 10.5 is to approve a donation from the Guilford High School Baseball Booster Group to pay the salary of an assistant coach for the boys' baseball team. Is there a motion to approve that donation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and then we have 10.6, a similar, the Netminders Booster Club to pay for 2 assistant coaches to the high school boys lacrosse team. The total is $6,226. Is there a motion to approve that donation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then 10.7 is to receive a couple of recommendations from the Policy Committee. Dr. Balistraci, do you want
Yes.
to highlight what that's about?
Yes, so the Policy Committee has been working on this for several months. This is coming out of Aaron's Law, which, and is, as a result, creating a policy and a regulation on exploitation, sexual harassment, and sexual abuse prevention and education. When we brought this to, or when we spoke about it, I believe probably at our last meeting, I noted that the committee was working to put forth a policy, and CABE provides a lot of help in doing that, but put forth a policy, but instead of adopting a new regulation to work the regulation here into our child abuse reporting regulation, because there are great deal of similarity between the two. In our most recent meeting, the decision was to instead maintain a separate regulation for this policy, largely because it allows then any reader of the policy, anyone looking for information, to have the regulation ready and handy, and it was just be that much more available. So we bring this to the Board of Education as a receive item only. We ask you to look through it. Both the policy and the regulation are based largely on that which CABE provided as a guidance. For the viewing public, again, this is a policy and a regulation that puts forth specifics around training of teachers, on awareness of sexual abuse, policies, reporting requirements, what needs to happen if we think a student or a staff member is in some way involved in a situation that requires addressing of that nature. A lot of what is in here are things that our school system already does, but we are required to have a specific policy for sexual abuse prevention and education. So, again, I bring this as a receive item only, and I ask board members to read it because we will be asking for a vote next month.
We have to have this in place by next fall.
Yes, yeah. And again, a lot of this are things we already do, but this again codifies it and makes it official. And if people, it is a longer read than many we bring to you, so if people have any questions, they should feel free to contact me or Mr. Bowden at any point.
Okay. Okay, any questions about it now, or just carry it over to next month? Okay. Committee reports? Anything else from you, Policy Committee?
No, we met last month, are reviewing a few additional policies. We have a truancy and attendance policy that we're reviewing. We have decided, though, to, instead of bringing that to the Board of Ed yet, to give each of the building level administrators time to look through it, so that when we roll it out, it will also be aligned with each individual school's attendance policy and the communication, more to the point, the communication of that attendance policy. And we're also wrapping up review of any final policies or regulations that have come out of the most recent legislative.
Okay. Operations Committee, anything?
We reviewed the financial reports that we went through and talked a little bit about going out to bid on some items that we're anticipating coming forward, which we've talked about previously, as well as some concerns over the excess cost grant, which I alluded to a little bit earlier when I was going over the financials with regard to the state adjusting those monies that would be provided to districts and what that looks like. So that looks like it's changing. It won't impact us too much in this budget cycle, but something to keep an eye on for the future.
Okay. Curriculum Committee?
We meet in 2 weeks.
Okay. Town Committee liaisons? All right, I guess Mr. Sands is not here. Obviously, Mr. Casey is not here, so okay.
Yep.
And the Learn Board of Directors, who went to the last one? It might have been Mr. Kazin.
No.
You did?
Yeah, but I didn't attend because
Okay.
I couldn't get out of my driveway.
Okay.
That makes it a problem.
Okay.
Those problems.
We do have one other business item to do, but that's an executive session on a labor negotiation with the nurses union, so we'll do that later. So we're up to public questions or comments. So if you have a question or comment, please just come up to the lectern, give us your name and address, please, and we'll be happy to listen.
Hi, my name is Sarah Salato. I'm 51 Kendall Court right here in Guilford. So, Dr. Freeman, Mr. Bloss, and Board of Ed, I want to thank you for giving us a little bit of time here. Mr. Bloss, as you mentioned, I'm obviously here to talk about the concern that I have in just the talk of the separation of the middle schools. And just the fact that you have this outcome right here shows you that even the little talk about it is concerning to us. So I just wanted to read to you what I've got written in front of me. So it's a big concern that we have. As my first child left the comfort of his elementary school, the concern that I had was what would this transition going to look like for him. Even though I had been told by many, many parents that Baldwin was an amazing school, I needed to wait and see for myself. And boy, were they right. From my experience with all three of my children, I could not be happier with Baldwin. It was an incredible step up from the elementary schools. They take these 10-year-olds as they walk through the doors with big, wide eyes of uncertainty and some with fear, and they walk them through the next 2 years, first with kids' gloves, and then giving them all the necessary tools they need to move on to that upper middle school. In my opinion, Baldwin is an incredible school, and why would we mess with that? The idea of putting fifth graders in the same building as eighth graders really, really concerns me. Having a son in Adams Middle School right now, I know far too much about what is happening there. I won't talk about that too much right now, as I believe that is a conversation for a different day, in which maybe we can just address the drug issues in our middle school and high school. When somebody asked me why I was against this divide, this was my response. There's an awful lot of reasons. We do not want our town to be divided in this way as it was 30 years ago, when there was rivalry in this town because of it. The present system works beautifully. The transition from the elementary schools to Baldwin is done so well. We don't think that fifth graders should be in the same building as seventh and eighth graders where inappropriate social media stuff is going on, where kids are vaping, and let's not forget the drugs that are sadly present in our eighth grade and quite possibly seventh. We don't understand why we would mess with something that is working well. The transitions causing depression and anxiety is not a good enough reason for this disruption in our school system. There are many, many other reasons why our kids are depressed and anxious that we believe come well before that those transitions have caused. How about we focus on bullying and maybe that drug issue I mentioned? Also, these high schoolers feel a tremendous amount of pressure because we want them to perform at a level that makes them anxious and incredibly stressed. We are a Guilford. We need the high scores. We need our kids taking AP classes. They need to make sure they volunteer, and also they should do sports. And what about work? Maybe they should or need to work. And music. We have an amazing music program, but that means these kids need to practice a lot. And I know this is how it is in most places. I know colleges and universities look for all this and more. And I feel for these teenagers. But maybe, just maybe, one or more of these reasons are why they are depressed, anxious, or suicidal. There is so much more that I want to say, and clearly I'm going to have a lot of time to say it if we go down this path. The reason I am here tonight, though, is that I hope you will reconsider even going down this path. I hope that in doing your research, that you are doing your research and you have a task force on this, and I get that you are in the very early stages, but it is my hope that instead of spending all this time and research, you will accept and understand the fact that most of our community does not want this change. I also hope that if you decide to move forward with further discussions about dividing these schools, that you will do it in an open and honest forum. I want to leave you with 2 comments we received from 2 students in our school systems. There was a lot of stuff people don't know about 8th graders in Guilford regarding their increasing exposure to drugs and abusive technology. The maturity gap between the 5th and 8th graders would be damaging. Coming directly from elementary school into a junior high school would expose the 8th graders to many things they simply do not have the maturity to handle. There are kids in the 8th and 7th grade doing drugs and being extremely provocative through social media. 5th graders straight out of elementary school are nowhere near ready to handle this. Also, why give an environment to set cliques and encourage bullying so early? What are the reasons for this desire to change? As a current high schooler, every single fellow student that I have spoke to has agreed that a later start time would literally not have any benefits, but only detriments. And this is another one from a student, and then I'll be done. Instead of being so obsessed with 15 minutes extra sleep you think we need, why don't you ask us why we are anxious and depressed? We would like respect. We would like to stay with our friends. We want Adams and Baldwin to stay the same. We want a school without fear of being bullied or being pressured to do drugs. We would like to have more time to do fun stuff and not always worried about excelling. You push, push, push. So proud of the feather in your cap, bringing a baccalaureate program for the high school, but that is showing us you care more about our academics and not about us as people. Maybe we just want to be kids. You break up our schools. Instead of your 22 juniors who have reported being sad at one point, you may have hundreds of depressed kids who are being torn from our friends. Doesn't our emotional state matter to you? Because you will be making things worse for me and my friends. You love your research so much, but why don't you ask us kids what we want? Or do our voices not matter? If you make this change, that is basically what you'll be telling us. Thank you for your time.
Others?
My name is Kathy Gambardella. I live at 87 Fall Road. I have 2 children in this school system, one in each middle school. And I have a couple of short questions, and then I would like to present you with a petition with close to 500 signatures from parents in Guilford who do not wish to see these schools split up, no matter what. The first one is, how long has this been in the very early stages? Because I did hear from my 7th grade son that he was presented with this idea back in September. Off the cuff, somebody in the middle school said it. So my question to you is, how long will it be in these early stages? Does anybody have an answer? I know that you've been meeting with different groups of the youth sports in our town, so that's been congregating. So apparently it's been going on for quite a few months.
Can I just clarify that we're not talking about the start time?
No, this is specifically, this petition is specifically designed about the split up of Baldwin and Adams and combining the 2. Whatever your reasons, our understanding from the minutes of last meeting was that it was definitely a direct correlation to the bus routes and saving money. According to the
meeting
minutes.
with sports teams and different groups about start times. I don't think we've
It was not about the splitting up of the youth sports.
No, like 3 years ago, I remember sitting here in the discussion after we had first raised the issue on start times and decided that to go to a 2-tier bus system and different options that we were presented with by a consulting company, that it was just going to be too much of a burden for our town to bear. At the time, one of the board members, and I believe Ms. Sullivan was one of them, Dr. Moore was another, had floated the idea, hey, have we ever explored going to a north-south split. That's probably the first time I heard about it. I know it's been raised other times. It didn't go anywhere at that time. We probably raised it in a couple of other meetings as, hey, is this something we should explore?
But specifically in this instance.
At the time, it was with regard to start times.
Okay.
Recently, as of late, it's been brought to our attention that there's been a lot of reports about suicidality in our school system, about depression, anxiety, and as an initiative, and Dr. Freeman can talk to this more, but we've been, trying to implement new homework policies and address some of the other issues that Mrs. Salato had mentioned as well, taking a holistic approach to anxiety and wellness. And transitions is one of those things that popped up.
And you don't think that this would cause more transitions?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't
We
know.
haven't explored
So,
it yet.
but my question was how, because obviously Dr. Freeman you've met with different youth programs in town, sports programs, recently, as in the last couple of months.
Dr. Canapari and I met with the leadership of all of the youth group organizations in town. They were all invited to participate. The agenda for that meeting was specifically to discuss start times. Dr. Canapari gave a presentation on start times, and the topic of the middle schools was interjected into the meeting. I specifically entered it into the meeting after we had discussed start times as a standalone item, as a one, related concern, and two, as a possible way to work towards start times. I have also had meetings on this topic specifically with Guilford Day, with Guilford Mentoring, with Guilford Parks and Recreation, as well as with a number of independent, unaffiliated therapists and counselors in the town who work with students, meeting with them to talk about the broader topic of stress and anxiety in general, and to talk about transitions specifically, as I tried to determine whether or not this was something worth spending some time and effort exploring.
Okay. So
May I
answer.
just add one thing? We as a board have not discussed this issue as a topic of consideration at all yet.
Okay.
So,
Well, that's
individual task
our
force are
main
thinking about it.
reason.
We have not.
Because this is like the early stages for us as parents as well. We wanted to get you guys the information as quickly as possible and as soon as possible to know that the community doesn't likes Baldwin and Adams the way they are. They work wonderfully. The kids transition perfectly. That isn't a solution to getting 20 more minutes in high school. The two shouldn't even be related. It should be separate things. Understandably, if money is the object, I'm sure half the parents would spend the money in the taxes for the buses and leave those middle schools the way they
Can
are.
I just interject? Because I just want to make sure you understand, like, we really have not
That's,
talked about this.
I understand. We
But
just, and this is
let me just-
again in the early
Can I just say
stages.
this, though, because it's really important that everyone understand this. We, as a board, really recognize the bigger picture that we're addressing, and it is really the mental health and wellness of our students. I mean, that's why we're all here all the time. And
Yes.
so this component is one little facet
Well, it's a
of
little
much bigger
facet,
picture.
but it's a big facet
I
to
know,
the children.
but we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't look at all of the information that's out there. And so we don't want to ever shut the door on understanding something a little deeper. And
Okay,
so I don't want to ever make it seem like we've all discussed, we have not.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
just one last thing I would like to say was that I don't understand how, as a board or as a superintendent, you would feel that disrupting two separate schools, 4 different grades, in any system would be less transition to gain 20 minutes of sleep, which the kids don't really even want. So that being said, that's my personal opinion, the opinion of many. I have a petition printed out, 485 as of right now, one for the superintendent and one for the board. There are many comments. I could read them all for hours, but you can read them in your spare time. We just wanted to get you the early stages of what the people are thinking when they heard about the 2 splits. Even if it's just a talk or it was just thrown out there, it did cause a lot of panic.
Well, nobody should panic. And everybody, I hope that we've kind of been, I know not a lot of people come to meetings. People don't, don't come to a lot of meetings, and maybe you're not familiar with the way we do business and the way we make decisions. We make decisions based on a variety of sources of information, sometimes research, sometimes discussions with administrators or faculty and students for that matter. Sometimes it's, I think one of the interesting things about this is there was a north-south split, and back 20 years ago, before any of us were on the board. But there are people in town who were here when it was. I'm sorry, Mr. Balistraci was here. Yeah, I thought I sort of hoped he might stick around and tell us a little bit about how did the current structure develop? I don't know. I have some idea from reading the minutes from back then, but I just think there's a lot that we need to get more information about, and it is 100% correct that I think there was a comment about how can we feel this way. We don't feel anyway on this issue. We haven't done any research on it. We haven't, and I think as Ms. Rader said, we really aren't doing our job if we don't look at every alternative, and we will look at it objectively, we'll look at it fairly. It may well be that we do a survey. We've done that before. We did that in a particularly unproductive way with the start time issue, where we had basically a split of a third in the survey results, which was not helpful, but in any event.
Thank you all for coming, because it's most helpful for us to see numbers when we're making any decision. And I think back to when we talked about full-day kindergarten and the ongoing conversation about start times. And one of the most challenging things for us as a board is to gauge where the community is on issues when we don't hear from them or we don't see them. So I think we all share the same philosophy that we don't make decisions because we feel like it. We make decisions to represent the community. So we consider your opinion to be the most important, and so seeing people for, against, just looking to be educated is the best way for us to learn about how people feel.
Hi, how you doing? Scott Guile. I live on Stepstone. I was just curious, have you looked at studies about combining 5th through 8th graders, about the emotional, social impact of that, as well as looking at studies that show the benefit of 15 minutes of sleep? I mean, has there been research looked at on both sides of that issue?
We're not at that stage yet. I'm sorry.
Have you looked at research on the sleep issue?
Yes.
Then you have
We've looked at that. Yeah. We have spent 3 years looking at the sleep issue. It is. I think it's fair to say that has been the most, I'm not going to say the most studied issue, but it has been extremely deeply studied. Now, the fact is, we haven't made any changes. Why? Because it's an extraordinarily complex issue, and I think we're actually waiting on Dr. Moore's task force to make some recommendations. Dr. Moore's task force is not going to make any recommendations regarding grade configuration. That's not part of their agenda. That's not part of what we asked them to do.
Is there another path to getting 15 minutes other than breaking up Adams and Baldwin?
I don't know.
We haven't heard from the task force yet.
But you just said the task force wasn't going to talk about grade configuration.
The task force is not going to make a recommendation about grade configuration.
Okay.
That's a board. That is eventually going to be a Board of Education issue.
I think based on what you see here, I think you have to realize that it's an insanely unpopular idea, the idea of breaking up Adams and Baldwin in that manner. Everyone here, I believe, is concerned about the idea of 5th graders with 8th graders, is concerned about segregating kids into basically 2 towns. I live in a place where my son would actually travel farther to Baldwin than he would be if he went to Adams, so he wouldn't even be going to the closest school. May I, if I could, my son is going to be transitioning into 7th grade next year, and right from the transition form, the bottom of it, the academic need of the student is the overriding determinant in team placement. Students with social emotional concerns documented by clinicians, teachers, social workers, counselors, administrators will be given some consideration in team placement. If this transition is such a stress, why would that be on the bottom of the transition form?
I think that's just relating to the idea that an individual parent can advocate for their child in terms of their own child's mental health needs or other needs. It's not, suggesting that there's not anxiety or depression outside of that. But if a child has a diagnosis, then they can be identified.
If a child has a diagnosis, he's going to be covered by special ed law.
Not always.
Not
Not
necessarily.
always. Not a mental health diagnosis, no.
Well, if the diagnosis is one that's going to lead the child to suicide, I would imagine that would be taken into consideration. But I find it odd that we're doing this for 15 minutes of sleep for high school students.
I can't stress this enough. We are not doing anything. If the thought
that
is
we're considering it.
Okay, if the one thing I've learned about this community, it's a fabulous community.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous.
I agree.
There is one thing that I feel very strongly about,
Mm-hmm.
is that when I'm standing in front of a board of finance, or I'm standing in front of a group, a PTO, or a group of parents, or something else, I want to be able to say that we looked at every alternative. And we said this is a good alternative, and that's a bad alternative, and here's why. That's all we're doing. If the thought is that we shouldn't even look at an alternative, I guess I just don't agree with that. I think we have to look at alternatives. Now, the alternatives may not make sense. They may not work for the town of Guilford. They may be unpopular. They may be too expensive. But to suggest that we shouldn't even look at an alternative to be able to defend the choices we ultimately make, I just don't know. I'm not sure I agree with that.
The Board of Ed serves the town membership and the citizens of the town. I mean, and if the citizens of the town are wildly against this,
So
why would
if
it
I
be
may
an
say
alternative
something,
that would be
This is a terrific
considered?
turnout, and we now have it looks like a petition with, I believe, we were told
485 signatures, yes.
And we have 3,600 students in our school, and we represent the entire community. So your voices are extraordinarily important. Anyone who comes to a Board of Ed meeting or reaches out to us in any way, it's really important. But you represent the group in front of you. You don't necessarily represent the whole town. So
How many
what we
people
have to-
came here to support this?
No.
There's nothing to say.
But the point is, I need to echo what Mr. Bloss said. We need to look at everything. Yours are not the only voices we may hear on this issue, and not everyone is apt to agree with your stance. So we will need to listen to everyone if we get to the point that we are actually considering this. And again, not only are we not at that point, this board as a group has never discussed this issue.
Yes, but you have
there will
We
be.
haven't.
I guess the
We can
important
play
thing.
the emperor's new clothes all day
No,
long.
no,
but
and
I
I
mean, I
don't-
know
I-
why we're all here.
Can I just say this? Like, this isn't us and you kind of thing. And I feel like that's the temperature that this is going. Please know that we all take our roles here really seriously. That we were voted into these positions by this town.
Yeah.
But what we are honestly saying is we have never as a group discussed this. Start times, yes, there is a task force, there is a collective of various individuals from the town, not just the board, discussing that. But like I want to reiterate again, we are looking at everything because we would not be doing our job and representing all of you if we didn't. I completely respect how you feel about this topic and all of you here. But please know, it is not an us and them kind of situation. We are really genuinely just touching on this topic. And we completely respect your feelings, but please don't feel like the decision's been made. You know, we haven't even gone there yet. And we like Bill said, we would not be doing our job if we didn't.
Would it be taken to a referendum if it were to finally pass the board scrutiny and
No, it's not a referendum.
There's only two things that can be voted on in a referendum. One is a budget, and the other is to make an expenditure of over $1 million. And so it isn't. Well, we may do a survey. That may be. I don't know. We haven't talked about that. We haven't talked about any of this. And we're not trying to.
I know. I just
hide anything here. But I feel like people think that a decision has been made. I promise that no decision has been made. No recommendation has been made.
I think people are very concerned.
That's
It's
great.
March, and we have kids that are, I would imagine, most of us, either in the middle schools or about to go to the middle schools.
We
and
do
don't
too.
want to see this
We're all,
happen.
a lot of us do as well.
Yeah,
So, and we look at that.
Perhaps we need to speak to something that may be a misunderstanding. There are no plans in place to make this change for the coming September. Nobody is talking about, nobody, even if I thought I was going to make a recommendation to this board to move in that direction, it would not be able to be implemented by this coming September. Adams and Baldwin will open this September in the configuration in which they currently exist. This concern seems to be in response to a letter that I published saying that we should be talking about this in this community looking forward. We've been talking about start times for 3 years and may be on the cusp of finally having a recommendation to the Board of Education about times. I just suggested publicly that we should engage in a similar conversation about grade configuration. If it takes 3 years, I don't know, but there are no plans or intentions to open this coming September with middle schools that look any different than they look today.
I think that's helpful. I know that's helpful to me. I can't speak for anyone else in the room, but that's comforting. So that process would be similar to the start time examination?
I don't know if it would be 3 years, but the process of having public conversations where we talk about it, yes, I have PTO meetings scheduled in most of the schools, and there will certainly be opportunities to have evening meetings where people could come out where the only topic on the agenda is to talk about start times, and they would be front-loaded with explaining how did we get here and why do we think this is a viable concern, and we would be able to explain what that might look like in the schools so that we could proactively respond to many of the concerns. I put the communication out there because we have been asked, what are we doing about stress, anxiety, and depression in our schools? That question was brought actively to the administration and to the Board of Education. So that communication went out to say, we're doing really micro-level stuff at the schools today, and we'll continue to do that and try to get better at it. We're looking at a big-picture solution like start times because we know that will make all of our students healthier. And I want to be honest enough to say that I came to this because of the conversation around start times, but we also even want to talk about grade configuration because anything that would make kids healthier and happier moving forward, it is my obligation to explore, even if it's unpopular. So that's the purpose of the communication. And I think if you go back and look at it, this is constantly presented as an idea, something on the drawing board, an early stages suggestion, but it's part of a big picture response to how do we keep our kids healthy and happy. And that's not just about grade configuration. It's not just about start time. This board looked at their homework policies last year. I know that the high school is talking about class rank. We're looking at things like the pressure that we put on students academically. All of that needs to be part of the consideration, and how do we support kids through the process. So I would encourage you to please take a look at the communication again. I tried really hard to say it's an idea worth exploring. It is not a plan that I am presenting at this time.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. And we all have the same concerns. I guess that I personally, I think a lot of us, having read comments on social media, having talked to other parents, don't make the connection quite that there was some juniors that were depressed in larger numbers than normal, and then we want to talk about breaking up.
Please go back and read the communication and look at the associated research. It's not about 10 or 15 or 20 kids in a single grade. This is a concern that schools are dealing with nationally, and we want to address this concern in Guilford as well. I'm sorry, Mr.
Well, that's
Claus.
okay. I was just going to suggest there are other people.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Stevens. I live on, Surrey Lane, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the minutes from the meeting from the 22nd. This might be where some of the confusion is coming. I can't make it to every meeting, but it might be helpful to be aware of what's in the minutes and how it can be construed to people who aren't at the meeting. They're hearing all of your discussions.
Are
It
these
said Miss-
task force meeting minutes?
Nope, this is from the Guilford Board of Education public hearing, Monday, January 22nd, 2018.
Oh, is this a
Page
budget?
4.
Budget
The
forum?
budget hearing at Adams, correct?
Budget here, okay.
Okay, go
It
ahead.
says, Mr. Bloss provided an update on the work done by the Start Time Task Force. One new idea they are looking for is that a reconfiguration of the 2 middle schools into 2 5th to 8th grade schools, with one serving the southern portion of the town and the other serving the northern portion. This change would make transportation to these schools simpler and more cost neutral. The original estimate for transportation for a later start time under the current system was $800,000. The new transportation bid would add an additional $300,000 to this cost, which creates a real challenge that could possibly be resolved with the school configuration. Another benefit to a 2 middle school system would be to reduce the number of transitions to different schools, as transitions are another source of stress for students. The task force will be developing a recommendation on this idea and is working on creating an option that would be budget neutral.
Yeah, no, I
That
think.
kind of like connects the idea. So if that wasn't what was intended, I would be aware of what's being written in the minutes and clarifying that for people who don't go to the meetings.
So I think what I said earlier is accurate. The task force is not making a recommendation on grade configuration. The task force, I hope, is going to give us some ideas and
Right.
options.
But it says one idea they're looking at is a
One idea.
reconfiguration of the 2 middle schools. So that's an idea they're looking at in relation to the start time
They're-
task force.
They are not going to make a recommendation as to configuration. That's going to be a decision to the Board of Ed.
Right, I'm just saying that this is what's out there, and that's where people
Okay,
are maybe
that's fine.
connecting these ideas.
I appreciate that.
That's a good comment.
No, that's, thank you. I'm sorry, you need to come to the mic, thank you.
I think a lot of these, my name's Lisette Chardello. I think a lot of these concerns are coming to the table because of some people who do read the minutes, and they are seeing that that has been brought up. So you're saying that, and I understand it's the very early stages, you're exploring all of your options, and I think as a committee, even an organization, businesses, that's what we do. We try to figure out what is the best alternative, and as you're stating, you're focusing on the well-being of our children. That's the number one priority. But with that, there's also financial cost as well, which you're trying to balance. So, I've been to some of these meetings, I've talked to some of these parents, and they're like, well, there's so many different things that are overlapping. The start time, the buses, the school consolidation. It's one thing after another. We can't separate or segregate which one we're really focusing on. So, one of the things I'm glad to hear you say is that this is not something that's imminent. It's going to happen next year. But I think our concern is that it is on your radar, and you haven't discussed it as a group. We understand that and respect that, but you are inquiring into potentially doing this. You've spoken to principals and see what the configuration is. And that's from the minutes, I think, that someone read. And I think that caused some people say, did you know about this? How come we didn't know about this? What's going on? And we, as just parents, voters, just want to understand where you are at the stage. If you're going to go forward with this, it's a potential. We want to know about it. As I think you all know how we feel about it. But I understand you have to balance it, and we want to make sure that whatever decision is made, it really is intended for the best interest of our children. And sometimes, and I know that's what it is. It should be all the time. I get that. I do understand that. But sometimes, my personal opinion, that there might be a little bit of a financial impact that we may have to absorb for the good of our children. And I understand we probably represent a small population of the town. It probably says we don't want to see our taxes go up or whatnot, but hopefully, and I think you have been doing this, is looking at alternatives to get more, I'm talking about sleep now, to give the kids a little bit more time, maybe including extra buses. And I know there's a financial impact. I don't know what that is. I'm sure you explored it, and maybe it's astronomical, maybe it's not.
It's somewhere around.
It's a lot of money.
It's between $500,000 and $750,000.
Per year.
Yes.
Per year. Okay. And I don't know what the format is of how that was, looked at, because I know there was all the talk about clustering. I have no idea what's behind all of that.
This is a hard town to transport kids in because
it's very large. I understand that.
because it's very large geographically. There are not many sidewalks, and that middle bus run is a tough run, and it pushes back times on in front and in back, because you'll have a bus going to the Wimler's Farm property up in North Guilford, and that bus has to go to Baldwin, then go to Adams before it does the elementary run.
Yes.
And then the next one has to go to Sachem's Head and to Adams and then to Baldwin before doing the other elementary run. It's ideally, you would have Baldwin and Adams in the same campus, and then that middle run would be a much more manageable run. But, the voters of our town turned down a plan to do that 15 years ago, approximately. And so we have what we have, and it is a real challenge. It's a challenge from the point of view of the health of the kids. Because they're kids that spend a long time on the bus.
Oh, I know. My
And it's
daughter
not
does
great.
50 minutes, and it is
How much?
what it is.
50?
50. It is what it is, and we live 10 minutes from Adams. But I don't want to focus on the bus thing. I know it is an issue, but that's not what we're here to talk about. That's what everyone's talk about. And again, I don't want to jump to different topics. But that is a concern. And, if it's that much money, will people vote for it? Won't? I don't know. That's something I'd rather do on a sidebar talking to someone else.
But that's a good point for everyone to understand, is when we submit this budget for referendum every year, what people don't understand is that, or maybe they do, but this is one little facet of an overall budget that takes care of our entire school district, right? And so to get down to minutia like this is so important. Like what not everyone understands is when we submit this budget, it's because of all this work and research and understanding and task forces all come together, and still with the effort that we want this to pass. We want people to vote for it, right? And not shoot it down like we had a few years ago where we had multiple referendums. So there is always a cost factor, but that is not our driving force. I mean, our driving force is the kids, but we also have to know that the community will support what we put forward, right? By voting for the budget.
Right, and if it's presented and explained, I feel that this is why we're doing it. It's for the best interest of our children, and we understand it. I feel, I can't guarantee it because I don't speak for everyone in this town, but you may have a better chance of it passing. Communication is big, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day, and really truly understanding where we're heading, why we're doing this. And the common goal for everybody in this room is our children and what's best for them.
Well, what I'll also say is this is great. Like, this is community participation. Like, we have meetings where we have 3 people in the audience, and so it would be nice to think that there would be this much interest all year long for all of the things that we're doing. And I understand this is all very personal and important to all of you, but it might encourage you to,
participate a little more.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would love. I'm not gonna ask for a show of hands, but 15% of registered voters actually vote in the budget referenda. 85% don't. So really, what that means is that and frankly, the demographic group that votes the least is the parents.
I think that I know being part of the answer for everybody online. They don't know because we have been encouraging our parents to get involved. I understand what you're coming from. I mean, I live in the real world. I understand that, but I think Dr. Freeman has done a great job of reaching out to PTO representative like myself at Baldwin and trying to speak to our parents to understand what it's all about, what they're voting for. Because a lot of times, time is not spent understanding what we're voting for. And we have to break it down to the simplest forms to understand how it affects us all, instead of reading this big, thick manual that no one is going to look at. So we start reading through it and how it's important, how it affects us. And I think that's what helped us get the vote for yes. And I'm an advocate of that. And again, we're doing this year of getting the word out, understanding what we're voting for. So parents are like, oh, this matters to me. Because we're so very busy. I know it's not a good excuse to get involved, but I think if there's someone that's helping us get the word out and having everyone understand what we're voting for, where this money is going, you'll get a better turnout. It's not easier said than done, but you got to give it a try. And we try to do that at Baldwin. And I'm sure the other PTO presidents do that at their schools as well.
So maybe it's really important at this juncture to remind everybody the budget that this Board of Education approved that is sitting in front of the Board of Finance as we speak has no money in it that is connected to increasing bus services around changing the start times. There is no funding or any plan to change the grade configuration of our schools. If there is to be any look at start times for this September, it would be budget neutral and would not be related to changing the configuration of Adams and Baldwin for this coming September. What is currently in the budget as it sits before the Board of Finance right now is an increase in elementary music. It is an increase in elementary teaching positions. It is a continued focus on instruction in the classroom, professional coaching to help our teachers be as effective as they can be, and continued academic excellence, while we are beginning as a leadership team to ask really important questions about how healthy and happy are our students in that environment that we are focusing on. So again, I want to be really clear. More music, classroom positions, and a continued focus on instruction are built into the budget that will come to referendum. This question about how do we keep our students healthy and happy, and how do we reduce levels of stress and anxiety and depression moving forward, is a bigger issue that we have launched, but does not have any specific or practical implications in the budget for which you will be voting in this April. So I think that's a really important clarification to make.
So next year, if the grade configuration were to get put up on the thing, would that be in next year's budget? If you were to say, like, it's going to be...
The question, I can answer the question. Yeah, the question was if there is a grade configuration for the
If there's a grade
proposal.
configuration that you all decided on, just say that you were to push it through, or that you were going to propose adding money to the transportation budget part, that would be voted on next year, because you're saying this year it's absolutely it's not going to happen.
The soonest that it could happen would be for September of 19.
19.
The
Right.
soonest that either of
But
those
that would
could
fall under next year's budget.
Assuming that there was a budget impact. Sure.
Right.
If there's no budget impact, it would just go under this year's?
No.
No.
If it was cost neutral, you would just do it?
No.
No.
If it, so I also want to explain, which I hope will partially answer your question. I won't pretend that we as a board will always identify what we think are the big issues, but I think we've done a pretty good job of it. And we have never, in my 6-year tenure, made a big decision without many public forums, without going out to PTOs, without sometimes doing surveys. The high school we're in right now, the build started a year later than was originally intended, so that the
Yes,
building...
but the way you guys are describing...
Please let me finish,
I'm
please let
sorry.
me finish. So that the building committee could listen to the community who was concerned about our athletic spaces, who was concerned about our music spaces, who were concerned about our theater spaces.
And concerned about the cost.
And concerned about the cost, okay? When we, there are members on the school start time task force who will tell you that they are very frustrated with us because we are taking a long time to look at this issue. Why are we taking a long time? Because we did a survey in which some community members said this is absolutely something we want you to do, and others said no. Teachers said yes, and teachers said no. Students said yes, and students
Same
said no.
type of thing with the grade configuration.
My point is, we are not going to make this kind of big decision if we even, as a board, decide it's worth considering without coming to you first.
Okay.
We won't do it.
Because
it's
you
not
seem to
how
be saying
we
it's a little
work.
teeny thing in one respect. It's
No,
just a
I-
lot
It's not.
more so,
No,
but
it's not what
a
I
big
said.
thing
I
to
don't want.
everybody
Sorry,
here.
I don't want that to be taken out of context, because what I meant was what I said was when we're looking at the overall health and wellness of our children, and as Paul explained, that this is a much broader topic than just start time, transitions. It's that it is one component in a very complex issue. If all the school districts in the country could solve the high rate of suicide, the high rate of anxiety and depression, we would have all done it by now. And so that is not what I meant, and that is not what I said, and I just want to clarify. And like I said, again, it's not you versus me or us versus you,
No,
but
it's just, as long as you would put it out there and create
We would
other
never
task
make a
forces. It just
decision
seems
this
like it's been
big
talked
without
about
input,
an awful
ever.
lot before we got a hold of it.
So I can report, by the way, Mr. Sands just sent me an email. We have had our budget cut by $250,000 in the last hour, and the town also had its budget cut by $250,000 in the last hour. So we will have to be making some reductions. So our budget will go from about 1.8 down to about 1.5 or somewhere in that area for a 1.5% increase.
So to that last point, if I could, I again want to note that I think the reason that this conversation is out in the community is because I published a letter to the community in which I talked about my larger concerns and this as one of the items that needs to be discussed. And in fact, I think I introduced it as one idea that you're all probably familiar with, start times, and one that might surprise you, right? So it is out here, and you're all here tonight because of a desire to be transparent in what we're doing. And I keep hearing people say, I hope this is going to be done transparently. I would ask that you trust the reason we're talking about it was because of a desire to raise it as a community conversation. I want the community to be engaged and informed and knowledgeable about this conversation. And that is specific.
Well, it's hard when your kid finds out before your parents 3 or 4 months prior. And then you find out 4 months later. So you say, how transparent is that if they're all talking about it and we're just hearing about it?
But they were at public meetings.
Your kids?
No,
The kids heard about it in school.
No,
in
but other
September.
parents are. So
Well,
maybe they're having conversations at home, and then the kids are. I mean,
I think it was
anytime it was mentioned
administrators at
has
the school.
been.
Can I make a suggestion again, if there are others that want to
Yeah,
ask questions or comment?
Good evening. My name is Danielle Morgan, and I'm from Bluffhead. I have 2 kids in this school system. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous school system, a wonderful community. I'm also a mental health provider here in the community. I'm clinical faculty at Yale University. I read your letter. I've looked at all the research that you're sort of depending on. And I just want to echo the comments of Sarah Salata. I've been treating children in this community for the last 18 years. Their psychiatric and substance abuse issues, and I cannot echo loudly enough that their anxiety and depression rates are just much more complicated than I'm thinking so far you're even acknowledging. So I'm wondering what kind of initiatives you're putting in place to address the bullying, much more intensively, to address the substance abuse. I've seen, what you're doing with the idea about getting more sleep, which does concern me. I sit seemingly in an unpopular psychiatric camp. I spend a lot of my time working with folks, families here and across Connecticut around sleep hygiene, following American Academy of Pediatric guidelines that absolutely, 8 to 10 hours a night is great, but they don't dictate when those 8 to 10 hours have to happen. So they don't need to cusp into the early morning hours. So I work, again, a lot with folks around those issues. So if you could just speak a little bit to some of those very endemic issues in our community.
I'm happy to. I just don't think there's time to do it on this agenda item. I can talk about the alternative high school schedule that we've built. I can talk about the TLC programming that we've brought into the high school. I can talk about a number of pieces that we have in place, including all of the healthcare professionals that we have hired into our roles at this time. Again, I would just note that this isn't on the agenda for this evening. I can spend an hour talking about
Well, and there's cooperation with Day, there's the
Guilford mentoring program, there's the small class sizes, there's much of what we do.
Absolutely. So I'm aware of all of that, and I guess in what I'm trying to sort of highlight is that despite all of those current interventions, again, based on what you've shared, our rates of depression and anxiety continue to rise. So what I would suggest is that, we also spend some time while you're focusing on, some of the school division and some of the start time issues, that we also look at some of the interventions that maybe other school systems are using, other ways we can engage our students and use our mental health providers in the community to address the much more complicated issues of anxiety and depression that's going on in the
Absolutely,
homes.
but I agree with everything that you just said. I would just like to, if possible, speak to any misperception that because we're talking about sleep and maybe talking about grade configuration, that we're not doing all of those things as well. So those are things that we have historically done and that we continually view as a work in progress and always want to strengthen and make better, and we continue to do all of that. But in addition to that, I think it is incumbent upon us to look at structures as well. So please, and I appreciate the question, I hope that the people who are viewing this don't assume that because we're talking about sleep or grade configuration that we're not concerned about everything that you just labeled as well. Those are at the core of what we do every single day, and much of what you just listed is in place, and every year we talk about how can we make that better and more effective. I hope people aren't assuming that we're ignoring that side of the equation.
Having said that, if you have, you refer to other districts and interventions that other districts do, send me an email. Tell me where you're talking about.
So there's a wonderful film called The Race to Nowhere that
We've
I
seen it.
encourage.
Yep.
Yes.
We know about that.
Excellent. That's sort of a great sort of springboard.
But are there districts that have interventions that you think are particularly effective that we ought to take a look at?
There's absolutely. Yes, there are. So I'm hoping that these task forces filled with these mental health professionals, can offer you some of that. If not, I would be happy to work with you around
Well,
that.
when people volunteer to do things, often
Absolutely.
they get appointed to a task
Absolutely.
force. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
My name is Heidi Smith, and I'm a parent of a current sixth grader. I had a lot to say tonight. A lot of it has already been said, and I'm going to try to edit a little of it so to not be repetitive. I am in strong opposition to the idea of dividing the schools. I'll date myself and say I was present in Guilford Public Schools when the schools were divided. It created the North Guilford Hicks and the downtown city kids. We had two teams of everything. We had lots of rivalry that I don't believe we need today. This was all before social media, so I can't imagine how social media is going to impact our kids if we don't move them and get them together before ninth grade. I would agree that 6 through 8 may be a common configuration, however, 5 through 8 is not. And I think in other school districts where 6 through 8 is a common configuration, there is one middle school feeding to one high school, not two going to one in a town that is our size. When we changed the configuration 20 years ago, it was developmentally and educationally sound for our kids, and I do believe that that research is still today. Fifth graders are ready to leave elementary at fourth grade. They're ready to get to that next step. Life is about change and adapting to change. Fifth graders go to Baldwin, and Baldwin does a phenomenal job transitioning those kids, identifying kids that need help with transition. They do team building, they practice acceptance, they practice inclusion. It is phenomenal what they've done with fifth and sixth graders. If you ask a sixth grader today about going to Adams, they'll say it's like the rite of passage. They get to go to school downtown. They get that next level of maturity that allows them some freedom. It teaches them in a small environment about change, about how those skills in life they're going to need going forward. I don't think stress is about transition. My short little research on the internet brought me to an article that talked about, from a professor of psychology at San Diego University, that states in part, around 2012, something started going wrong in the lives of teens. In just 5 years between 2010 and 2015, the number of U.S. teens who felt useless and joyless, classic symptoms of depression, surged 33% in large national surveys. Teen suicide attempts increased 23%. Even more troubling, the number of 13 to 18-year-olds who committed suicide jumped 31%. It continues to state, we found that the time teens spent on homework barely budged between 2010 and 2015, effectively ruling out academic pressure as a cause. However, according to Pew Research, smartphone ownership crossed the 50% threshold in late 2012, right when teen depression and suicide began to increase. By 2015, 73% of teens had access to a smartphone. Maybe our focus needs to be on fostering that relationship on screens and fostering communication rather than dividing our schools. I am one that reads minutes all the time. It's difficult for me to come to a meeting. So the perception of many of the meeting minutes on school divide goes back to November. months before your email came out about the idea of dividing the schools. It appears that this idea has been floated with a fair amount of research into it since November. So it doesn't appear that there is transparency to the public. And I think that that is a huge problem we have in addition to school start times, is that the perception is that the actions are not meeting the words of what you're saying. And I think that that needs to be addressed. Social media has a lot of chatter out there. I read a lot. The perception is, in order to get your attention, we need to vote the budget no. That tells me there's a big transparency problem between the public and the board. And I think that that really needs immediate attention, getting ahead of a budget.
Can I just speak to
Yes.
that a second, if I may? I do have to tell you that one of the things that several of us on the board do is spend some time, for instance, on Facebook on Simply Guilford, monitoring the discussions that go out there, because time and time again, it appears that what happens is people put their questions out there and don't bring them to us. All 9 of us have our phone numbers online on Guilford Public Schools website. We all have Guilford Schools emails. You are welcome, any one of you, to call us and email us at any time. And it would be so, so helpful if people did that first and asked questions first instead of throwing them out to social media. That's not to say that all of you here isn't terrific, because it really is. I echo Mrs. Sullivan entirely. It's very hard for a board to make decisions when we don't have public input. It is why anytime we have a big decision that we come to you guys, come to the community, try to have meetings, try to get people in. But it would be really, really helpful if people have concerns that they bring them to us before they throw them out on social media, because the number of times that the information gets twisted and turned and changed and then creates problems, it happens more times than I can tell you. And again, we have members of the board, we spend time monitoring so we can insert a comment that says, well, actually, that's not true, or here's a clarification. So just a plea. It doesn't lessen your concerns, it doesn't lessen this conversation, but a plea that people come to us when they have concerns and questions. We can answer them a lot better than your neighbor or your friend who doesn't have the information we have.
And I don't disagree with you. The one thing I will note, though, is I did go to the Board of Ed. There doesn't appear to be assignments anymore of Board of Ed people to schools. It says to be determined. So I had attempted to go to whoever my Board of Ed person was in Baldwin, but there are no assignments out on the webpage.
You may, so we will have to change that, because we all are all assigned to a school. So we will, that's the thing we will remedy.
That's just a website update. I didn't know that hadn't been updated.
We will remedy that.
We can make that more prominently
But please
placed.
note that you can, I'm the
any
board
of us.
liaison to Guilford Lakes. You can email me no matter what school your kids are in, and that's the case for anyone here on the board.
And I have one other question. It appears that the agendas get posted very late. And I looked on Tuesday for the agenda for tonight in terms of planning purposes, and it wasn't posted yet. Now, I was out without power from Wednesday to Friday, so not sure when it got posted. But is it possible to have more lead time on what is going to be presented in an agenda so that people can plan or make arrangements if they need to come? And sometimes I can't. I do read all of the minutes. I'm a big reader, and I rely on those minutes to be accurate based on what is said.
We generally do, and I would ask you not to hold this past week as an example of our common practice. We were impacted this week by some staffing issues as well as the weather. We generally try to have our agendas out in more lead time than what this week represents.
Okay.
I just wanted to, again, reiterate, because you were talking about, seeing the minutes and reading the minutes and noticing that it was brought up back in November, and that it seems that a whole lot more research has gone into this than we are indicating has. And I would just reiterate again that you're reading those minutes because they're public meeting minutes, and these are meeting minutes of public meetings that everybody can attend, and it's our way of talking to the community. This is our forum to be able to interact with the community members, understand what the community wants. So when you read meeting minutes, when you read them in November, that would have also been a fine time to come to the next meeting and say, hey, I noticed this on the meeting minutes. I'm concerned about it. Maybe you could offer a little bit more insight. So I did want to reiterate that. And I also want to just touch on something you said about your perception that a lot of people would want to vote the budget no to get our attention. And I just want to say that that would be so detrimental and so sad to our student population, because as you just heard, we're already going to have to deal with making another cut of $250,000, and we build that budget based upon the public forums that we hold in January and back in October, November timeframe when Dr. Freeman is getting ready to build his budget before he even presents to us, and all of the things that are in that budget rely on community input. So we are adding to the music program because the community has told us they want to see more of the arts. We're adding a teacher at Calvin Leet because the third grade is screaming like, we are at capacity, we're over capacity. And if we have a town that votes these referendums down, as you know, I'm sure, and we've all been through in years past, we have to take a look at those cuts seriously and say, well, we can't obviously we're not going to cut teachers and salaries and benefits. Those are all contractual things. So what goes? Well, what goes are the additional music teachers.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I've always been a proponent of that. What I'm voicing is, this is what's being said by people in order to get.
Can I ask a question, though, about that? What major decision that the Board of Education has made in the last 10 years was done in a less than a transparent way?
I think that in the past you have been very transparent. This issue has disturbed me because I feel like when I saw the one line in the November minutes, and it was the holidays and I didn't attend, and then it kind of escalated based on what I saw, and it appeared that it is not transparent. And I do not think that you have behaved that way in the past, and I didn't mean to imply that.
There is a reason that it is. We are. I know we're starting to get repetitive, but we are not anywhere. We are this far down a very long road. And I promise that that if we even look at this issue, it is going to be done openly, like full-day kindergarten, like the high school building, like the homework policy, like
the International Baccalaureate program, even the math materials that we purchased several years ago. They were all done with intensive public input. I've been making a list, Mr. Blost. All of the major changes that have occurred in this district have been done with intensive public involvement. And I would ask people to judge this board in this school district on their record rather than on concerns that are being raised on social media right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jamie Mickelay, 301 Willow Road, and I just want to say I am so happy this meeting happened, because being a member of the community, I can tell you as a parent, there is a lot of anxiousness out there, and unfortunately, not a lot of trust that this is going to be transparent. I can't say why that has happened, but I would say it has been out there, and it has just been kind of nerve-wracking as a parent. And I had a neighbor come home and say that they heard from a teacher that this was going to be happening in a year. So, and then I don't know why that occurred, but that's the kind of thing that I am hearing. And I'm wondering if there's a way to make the communication from the board to the PTOs or just the general public better. And I don't exactly have the answer, but I would be willing to help with the answer, because I think a lot of what happened tonight
is a miscommunication. And I do know a lot of you personally, and I do trust you. I don't think you're trying to hide anything, but I do think it's hard as a busy parent to really stay up on the issues of town. It's not easy to look through the whole budget. I mean, my mind kind of spins because I'm like, ugh, how am I going to understand this? What am I going to say? Because I do want to be the person that is able to explain this. So,
can I make a suggestion? Mm-hmm. I know that there's the PTO collaboration Facebook page that, you know, it's mostly the elementary schools probably, but I think it's all the PTOs. If the PTO presidents got together, and it doesn't have to be a president, it can be any member of PTO, and made a rotation and said, can you guys go to the December meeting? Can one of you go to the January meeting? I know the teachers do that a lot. They'll send a representative. That way one person can sort of get the information back and people aren't saddled with coming to monthly meetings.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great idea. And I did have one other point that I had forgotten for a moment, so what was it?
Well, the good news for you is that we need to change the tape, so you have a pause.